If you're just starting Blender, this video is going to cover the basic stuff you actually need to know. I'm not going to walk you through making some random model because honestly, one of the best ways to learn Blender is just start making something. You'll probably get stuck, that's fine. Look up how to do the thing you're stuck on, try it, and keep going. That's basically how I learned Blender. Before we do anything, let's head to the Preferences tab and change a few things. First, set up your navigation to whatever feels comfortable. You can change things like mouse and keyboard control, scrolling, and navigation preferences. You can also change pretty much any keyboard shortcut in Blender, so if there's a shortcut you don't like, you can change it. However, when you're starting out, I recommend sticking with the default Blender shortcuts. The reason is pretty simple. Almost every Blender tutorial, guide, and troubleshooting video is going to assume you're using the default shortcuts. If someone says press G to move and you change that shortcut, you're going to have to translate everything back to your own setup. You can always customize shortcuts later once you know what you're doing. Another thing I recommend changing is how you switch between different modes and editors. Instead of constantly clicking the menus at the top, you can set up your tab and mouse for your navigation to quickly switch things like object mode, edit mode, and pose mode, and navigate between editors like the shader editor. I personally recommend this because once you get used to it, it's much faster than constantly moving your mouse up to the menus. You don't have to use this setup though, use whatever feels comfortable for you. And if you're start working with materials and nodes, I recommend Node Wrangler. It's free and it adds a bunch of really useful tools, geometry nodes and shader editor. You can look it up right here, Wrangler, and then just enable it. I'm not going to go deep into the nodes in this tutorial because that's basically a whole tutorial by itself. I might make a separate video going over nodes later. So when you first open Blender, it can look very overwhelming, but really all you need to know about are a few things at first. This big area in the middle is called the 3D viewport. You can see it, the label right there. This is where you'll be doing most of your work. The outline right here shows everything that's in your scene, and the properties area is where you'll find your settings for objects, materials, rendering, which is here, and that's output right here, and a bunch of other stuff like physics and constraints. You don't need to memorize what everything does. You'll learn the interface as you use it. First of all, learn how to move around. Hold the middle mouse button and move your mouse to orbit around the scene. Use the scroll wheel to zoom. Hold shift, middle mouse button to pan. You can also use the number pad to quickly change views, but if you don't, that's fine. There's other ways to access those views, like up here. There's a few shortcuts you should learn immediately. G, which kind of grabs it. R is rotate, S is scale, and in edit mode, which you'll hold tab to go to, or you can switch up here. You can go to face mode, for example. E is extrude, and you can also extrude, then scale inwards and make stuff like that. And then there's rotary mode and stuff, but yeah, I'm not going through that yet. You can also lock them on the axis. You can lock them on the axis. G and Z moves it up. G and Y moves it sideways. G and X moves it forward, frontwards, depending on which way. They're just axes. Yeah, RZ rotates around the Z axis, for example. S scales along the X axis. This will become muscle memory pretty quickly. Okay, I already went over this a little bit, but object mode versus edit mode. Blender has a bunch of different modes, but two you'll be constantly using are object mode and edit mode, at least for 3D modeling. So that's how you switch. Object mode is where you're moving the entire object. Edit mode is where you're editing the actual geometry. You don't need to memorize every modeling tool yet. You can pick them up when you actually need them. Materials. This is a very basic material thing. There's materials. A material basically controls, you need in material mode to see it, how an object looks. You can change things like the base color here. That changes basically the color. Roughness, You can make it shiny and stuff. And metallic. Alpha basically makes it see-through. Yeah, I'm not gonna go through much. So that's basically the beginning stuff. You can also go into edit mode, and here can assign certain parts. So let's make a new material white. Can also go into the shader editor, which I would just recommend going here. Since you have the node angular, you can map it. But yeah, and you can add stuff like, for example, textures, gradient texture, sure, and then base color, and also gradient. I'll go over that in a different tutorial probably. Okay, lighting is very basic. I'm not going into that much. Lighting is pretty simple to start with. Blender has different types of lights. Okay. Oh yeah, Shift A is add. I forgot to say that. Lights, point, sun, spot, area lights, a great place to start. This is a sunlight. We can delete these. Okay, so you might want to be in render mode to see what's actually happening. Yeah, like that. I am in EV. There's also cycles and a few more. This is like if you just want to render like a play blast. But EV is the real-time rendering. Cycles, like you can mess around with it, power, exposure, a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, don't overthink it, just put a light somewhere. Yeah. Okay, animation basics. Just move it out. Okay, so keyframes. It lets you animate basically anything that's a property change, like color. Like you can do this, and like press space to move it on the timeline. So now you have it changing color. Boom. Okay, that's not what it's showing though. So keyframes here. Keep this here. Press I to keyframe. Now grab it, put it somewhere else. I. You just moved it. Blender fills in the movement between those, but like these are a bunch of different interpolations and easing. There's also a graph editor, but let's not go into that yet. It's a little bit complicated, but you will need to know it later on. Okay, so next, okay, I'm still on animation. The timeline at the bottom, which is this, controls where things happen. You can also use a graph editor later. Yeah, I'll just remember keyframes tell Blender what something should do at specific points in time. There's also a dope sheet, which is basically the same thing. Yeah, we'll just say it's basically the same thing for now. Okay, rigging basics. I'm just going to delete everything. So, rigging is basically making a skeleton, like controllable skeleton for a model. You can create an armature, which is made up of bones. And you can like extrude a bone and add another. You can put the bones inside or around a model, then connect the model to the armature. Once the rig is set up, you can go into pose mode and move the bones around. This lets you animate things like characters, creatures, or anything else that needs articulated movement. Rigging can get extremely complicated, but at the basic level, just think model, bones, connect them, pose, animate. We're not going to go into this right now. The most important part, and honestly, this is probably the most important advice I can give you. Just make stuff. Don't spend 3 weeks watching tutorials before you actually touch Blender or any 3D modeling or like animation program. Think of something you want to make and try it. Maybe it looks terrible. Just finish it. Who cares? If you don't know how to do something, look it up. Search something like how do I make a hole in Blender, which you can use booleans and stuff. How do I animate an object? How do I make this material? How do I rig a character? Then try what you found. You slowly build up a collection of things you know how to do, and eventually you'll stop needing to look at everything. Blender is not a skill. And one more thing that's important, once you actually learn 3D, switching to another 3D program like Maya and Cinema 3D, Houdini, except that's more simulation, becomes a lot easier. Blender isn't the skill itself. The skill is understanding how things like modeling, materials, lighting, animation, rigging, cameras, and how 3D space works. The buttons and the menus might be different in another program, and the keys, but you can change those most likely. But the concepts are still there. So if you learn Blender and later have to use something like Maya, 3ds Max, Cinema 4D, other 3D program, you're not starting from zero. You'll mostly be learning where the program puts the tools you already understand. You're learning 3D. Blender is just a tool you're using to learn it. You don't need to know all of Blender before you start. Learn the interface, set up your preferences, learn how to navigate, learn the basic transforms, understand object and edit mode, learn some basic materials and lighting, and understand the basics of animation rigging. Then start making things. The rest comes from actually using Blender. And yes, you're probably going to make some absolute terrible, terrifying looking stuff, but that's part of learning. Any questions, just comment. And me or some random person from the internet will help.